This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
In August, about 75 tornadoes touched down nationwide. Indiana averages 1.4 and Ohio just 2, but not always. Not this year.
2016 has been anything but normal. While May ranks as the number one tornado-producing month, this year, February and August will finish in the top 5.
A series of synoptic situations came together in the wrong place at the wrong time to challenge forecasters as tornadoes spun across central Indiana on August 15th.
It was just loud and crazy, and I was just praying.
Then, about a week later, on August 24th, it happened again. 21 tornadoes in Indiana and Ohio, and 2 more in Canada.
They stated that there were homes hit on Webster Street. That's where my son lives, and that's where my granddaughter was. And I couldn't reach them.
Both times, conditions came together too quickly to predict a tornado threat. When the local warnings were issued, residents responded.
I'm amazed that no one was killed or significantly injured.
This is Tornado Talk, a severe weather surprise. 2 weeks of twisters. Nearly half of the national August average occurred in 2 states on the 15th and 24th of August 2016. To better understand how the storms quickly went tornadic, the National Weather Service studied what happened.
On the late afternoon of August 15th, an area of low pressure moved north of central Indiana, while warm, moist tropical air mass was in place. A single, long-tracking supercell thunderstorm moved northeast through Hendricks, Boone, Hamilton, Tipton, and Howard counties. That cell produced 6 tornadoes. 2 other thunderstorms spawned separate tornadoes, one in Avon and another northwest of Lafayette, Indiana.
Joe Lucas is from Avon, Indiana. On August 15th, he heard the siren sound, and that made him want to look outside to see what was happening.
There was a couple of us that were left here at the office, and we heard the sirens go off, and so that made us look and see what the reason for that. And it turns out it was a tornado warning. You don't usually get warnings. And it hadn't really been rainy, overcast. So I wasn't expecting that kind of weather. And then I looked online, and it said there had been something spotted in Danville, which is the next town over where my parents live. So I called them, and my dad said they hadn't seen anything, but he heard that there was a tornado around 10th Street, which is about a mile north of where I was. I was traveling east on a west to east road, and I saw debris lifting. So it was the very start of a funnel, and so I thought that was interesting. And I had some guy tailgating me, so he pushed me further than I wanted to go, and I made a turn going north. That's where I kind of saw the more tornado feature thing to the back of me. So I backed into an area in a neighborhood to try to get out of the direct line. And the tornado passed over me, but there was 3 transformers at the end of the road that blew. And there was some pretty good-sized trees that got knocked over while I was there. And obviously you see the wind blowing everything in the direction I was going. And it passed over, and then that's where I thought, I should video this. And so as I did that, I kind of followed it and filmed it a little bit as it had passed beyond me. And then what's interesting about the video is I would say that it probably bounced over the house that was in between. And a person came out on their front porch and was looking south, and the tornado was to the north behind them. And I said, "Hey, there's a tornado behind you."
Behind your house!
And they said, "Yeah, I heard there was tornadoes." And I said, "In your backyard."
There's one right there! Tornado!
And he nonchalantly walked to the edge and looked to the tornado that was this huge-looking tornado in his backyard.
The Avon, Indiana tornado was rated EF1 with winds of about 95 miles per hour. It was on the ground for about 2 miles.
Dan McCarthy is the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Indianapolis. He was part of the survey team that rated some of the tornado damage that day.
Yeah, I was with the emergency manager in Hendricks County that day, and we took a drive from Clayton, Indiana, all the way north up to Brownsburg, and those kind of tornadoes. They touch down briefly, and then they kind of hover over the area, but they're picking up debris. So even though it looks like a funnel cloud that's just hovering over the area, as long as it's picking up debris, it's a tornado. And so we did get to see mostly large limbs, trees totally uprooted. I mean, we were talking about trees that were there a long time because they were huge trees, big, tall trees that were uprooted and brought down, and they formed to a pattern. We went into one neighborhood there where one home had one tree that would face the northeast, and then the next tree just next to it was facing the southwest. So that kind of indicated some vortice action there. We noticed that a pontoon boat was lifted and displaced upside down 100 feet from its original location.
Overall, the strongest tornado that occurred on August 15th was an EF2 twister in the Whitestown area. There was one EF1 near Sheridan, an EF1 that hit Brownsburg, and another EF1 in the Clayton area. 3 other twisters affected Tippecanoe, Howard, and North Hendricks County, all rated EF0. The best news of all, no injuries.
Destin Wright and Seth Moat from Kokomo own a company called Nighthawk Productions. Their company uses a drone to shoot video. On August 15th, the two captured a captivating sight.
I think that we're right outside of Greentown because we're so turned around because we followed this storm all the way from Indianapolis. So I tell Dustin, I said, you need to get on the phone because your family lives in Greentown. And he immediately lands his drone, gets his phone out, calls his family. We actually watched the tornado form, come down, touch ground. So we basically filmed it. It went up and got in the car, went home, and we were on cloud 9, obviously, and super adrenaline rush. I've never done anything like that before, but I think I'm actually kind of hooked now. And unfortunately, I'm kind of looking forward to the next storm to come along.
You might say that sending a drone to transmit live video of a tornado in August would be one of the most talked about events of the summer. It was. But little did Dustin and Seth realize, just over a week later, the drone would return to the air for another surprise.
On the afternoon of August 24th, 2016, the atmosphere didn't need a moderate or high risk to produce an outbreak of severe weather. Dan McCarthy, meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Indianapolis, along with his team of forecasters, were issuing the warnings that day. What looked like a day that might produce a few strong thunderstorms quickly turned violent.
Well, we were monitoring the conditions for that day on August 24th, given that the National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center originally had us in a marginal risk. As we continue to moderate the day, or at least keep track of the day, the late morning outlook from SPC then bumped part of Indiana into a slight risk. And that slight risk was mainly for a small part of central Indiana and southern Indiana. But earlier that day, we did have some showers and some isolated thunderstorms with a warm front that went through. And that could have laid down some weak boundaries that were somewhat innocuous as far as the surface data was concerned. But that particular day, when storms started to develop over central Indiana, we heard that some of them have gone tornadic and we're starting to rotate, and that's when we first decided to really act and start issuing tornado warnings for that particular day.
For the past 13 years, Kenny Beasley has worked on the air at WWKI Radio in Kokomo, Indiana. It was the tornado warning alert that popped up on his smartphone that let him know the thunderstorm headed toward the city was much more than anyone realized.
So when the warning came on my phone, and everyone in my family was in a different location. And this is the first experience I've had with that. I've got 2 young daughters, a 5-year-old and a daughter who's almost 2. And when the warning went off, the very first thing I thought of was all 4 of us are in different locations. My wife is at her job about 40 miles away. My oldest daughter is in kindergarten at her school. This is her first time going through a tornado warning at all. Especially in a school setting. And then my youngest is with her grandparents, and I'm not with any of them. So my very first instinct when that warning was triggered was to, first of all, make sure everyone knew that there was a warning and that there was a storm coming. I got a hold of the grandparents that were watching my youngest child because they happened to be in the direct path of this. And within about 5 minutes of talking to them and warning them, hey, I see this warning, it just came out of nowhere, but it looks like it might head your direction, I got a call back from them saying that they had been hit. And when that call came in, my gut just sank, my heart just sank, because they've got my youngest, they've got my daughter who's not even 2 with them. And they said, everything's okay, we're okay. But they said the front roof is gone, the front porch, the whole front porch enclosure, everything like that was gone, and they couldn't tell the extent of the other damage. At that point, when I was finally able to track the storm a little further, I realized that it's heading towards the school where my oldest daughter is at. And it's about release time. To give you a time of reference, when the warning hit was about a minute before the school would have released kids to go on the buses. And it was, for me, as a father, not just as, someone who's been a broadcaster and been someone who has followed these storms for years, but as a father, that was a major freak out moment. Again, because I just had one daughter in a building that got hit by the storm, but thankfully was okay. And now I've got this tornado that's been confirmed heading towards the school where she's at.
Seth Moat at Nighthawk Productions in Kokomo recalls getting that same notification he received before on August 15th, a tornado warning, this time headed closer to home.
We were here at my office. I work on the west side of Kokomo, Howard County, and our phones went off, and they said, tornado, severe, weather, tornado warning, take shelter now. Every time my phone did that, there was a tornado somewhere in our site within a few minutes. And my phone goes off here at the office. There's 4 of us in my office. And I tell everybody, I said, guys, this is real. It's on my phone. This happened a week ago. We need to get shelter. There's no shelter here in my office, and it's all glass windows. So my boss immediately just says, go home. I live 2 miles west of my office. I get in my car and I'm heading home. And I'm within an 1/8 of a mile from my driveway, and I look up and there's a tornado literally going across the street behind me. And it was the first tornado that touched down in Howard County on Boulevard in Malfalfa. So obviously it was a scary moment. You could see debris flying. It was literally right behind my car. I turn in my driveway. I go in my basement for a few minutes, no more than 5, and I go back out because you could tell that cell was going towards the east, right into the middle of Kokomo. So I actually grabbed my drone. I grabbed some bottles of water and just kind of go, after the storm. And as I come back down Boulevard Street towards Malfalfa on the west side of Howard County, there's the first sign of damage that I see.
Tammy Lively was born and raised in Kokomo. She moved away for a short time to Indianapolis, but returned to her hometown, where she's the afternoon personality at WWKI Radio. After traveling with her sister and brother back from Indianapolis on August 24th, she remembers where she was when the sky turned dark.
And as we were coming home, I was, you're always observant with weather, and I'm looking to the west, and I'm seeing that it looks like it's going to rain. But that's all it looked like. It just looked like it was going to rain. So we get home. My purse had been in the back seat, and my phone had been in my purse on mute. And after they got out of the car, I grabbed my phone so I could call the station and say, hey, I'm back in town. I'm on my way. And when I grabbed my phone, it was about 3:14, 3:15. I'm seeing tornado warning from the American Red Cross app. But I had it on mute, so I didn't hear it. Well, I was shocked. My brother lives just around the corner, another brother. I have a very large family. And I ran into his house to see if he was aware, looked at the radar, and turned on the radio immediately in the car, and they're on the air. We have a tornado warning. It's on the ground in Kokomo. And at that point, I'm honestly kind of freaking out a little bit, because as a broadcaster, you want to be right there. You want to be in that chair telling people where the danger is, and that's where I should have been. But I was so fearful if it was on the ground. I'm in between the tornado and work, and I didn't know what to do. Do I sit here and wait it out? Well, then my phone just starts blowing up, and all of these things happened so rapid fire. I'm talking within a matter of minutes. Another brother called. I had, like I said, a big family, and he was out and saw the tornado and was actually chasing the tornado. And he called and he said, Tammy, oh my God, he said, you should see these homes across from Markland Mall. He said, there are no roofs. And I'm just kind of stunned because I wasn't expecting bad weather, and this was all happening within a matter of minutes. And I decided then, he said that he saw it going east. It was off towards Greentown. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go if it's not on the ground in town anymore. And I'm listening to him on the phone, and I'm monitoring the radio, and I'm beginning to drive through town, and they stated that there were homes hit on Webster Street. And I'm going to get emotional now just talking about it. That's where my son lives, and that's where my granddaughter was. And I couldn't reach them. And, my son's a millennial. They don't have television. They watch Hulu, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're at home and probably watching a video or something on Hulu and not even aware of what's going on. So I was really amped up because I couldn't reach him and didn't know if they were all right. And then I'm driving down 931 towards work, and I get to the area that my brother was talking about at the mall. And that's an area where I finally got my cell phone out, and I actually shot some video because I thought people have to see this. They're not going to believe this damage. And I was so afraid that, warnings wouldn't be heeded. People are anymore. They think, oh, well, it's not that bad. But the damage was devastating. To my left, there was a Starbucks that had been there that was absolutely flattened. I look over to my right to the Cedar Crest subdivision and literally saw just walls. No home, just a wall and roofs off, like my brother said, and just total devastation.
The Starbucks in Kokomo that collapsed from the strength of the tornado's winds had 20 people inside. It was the quick thinking of shift manager Angel Ramos who got everyone to shelter. He told his story to the Kokomo Tribune.
I got an alert on my phone that there was a tornado warning. I got immediately afterwards, I called for my main manager to get everything ready in case of an emergency, to try to prep everyone for the bathrooms, and we got the first aid kit and everything, and I tried to. She called me again and told me to, go ahead and go for it. And I was watching the storm from right behind the Best Buy, from the view of the Starbucks. And as soon as I saw the clouds twisting, we got everyone inside. We closed the doors, and all of a sudden it started rattling, and we were trapped inside because the building collapsed. But everyone came out unscathed. We were all fine. Everyone that was in that building came out just fine.
Not long after the Starbucks was damaged, WWKI's Kenny Beasley found out the whereabouts of his daughters.
The only thing I could do at first was just hold them. I mean, I was able to get to my youngest first, and I got into the house and, was able to see the damage, first of all. And just to see that type of damage and the fact that no one was injured was amazing to me, first of all. How the front half of the house had its roof taken off, had again the roof, the porch enclosure, everything taken off, and there was already some pieces of the roof coming down inside the house. But they were okay. Everyone was okay, and I just picked her up and I held her. And then my next instinct was, okay, now I've got to get to where my other daughter is. And it took me a drive that should be 15 minutes. It took me about an hour, and most of that was just to go not even a mile. And that was just because of how much traffic was in the area because of the damage, that initial tornado had caused, and everyone trying to get from point A to point B, again with the, school dismissal time being right at that time, people getting off work. It was a shift change at the factories. So by the time I got out to her, I mean, I was pretty stressed out already, because I had that hour drive to really, process and wonder what's got to be going through her mind. She's been there without me. She's been there without anyone that she really knows. At any time that there's been a tornado warning in the past, I've been broadcasting it and been able to tell her, be able to reassure her, this isn't coming towards us. We're okay. You're safe. There's nothing to worry about. I'm here. In this storm, I wasn't there. I didn't have anyone that was familiar with this, to even know what was going on. So I, got to the school and was able to, get her, give her a hug. And she really didn't know what was going on other than that they had to go to the basement for quite a while and that she had to stay at school for a little bit. It wasn't until I showed her a picture of the damage that I think it really hit me. To give you an idea, she's very close with the grandparents that the same ones that had the youngest child. And I wanted to give her an idea before we got back there so that she kind of knew what we were getting into, especially with this being something new, something that she's never experienced. When she saw the picture of the damage at her grandparents' house, she broke down in tears. And she started asking me, she goes, why did this happen? Why did this have to happen? And, I'm trying to explain to her in the best 5-year-old terminology I can think of about, the natural force of a tornado. And, kept reassuring her, everyone's okay, everyone's okay. When we actually got back to the house and we couldn't get to the house, we had to park a couple blocks away because they had it all blocked off. We had to park and then walk through a lot of the debris to get to the house. I mean, she was in tears. She was, again, just wondering why did this happen? How did this happen? To her, it didn't make sense that the sky could just essentially open up and take out part of a house that she's known all of her life.
Back at WWKI Radio, meteorologist Ryan Gregory was informing listeners about the storms, where they were moving, and the reports of damage. In most radio stations, there's a manual to guide you through how to cover severe weather. This time was different. What was going through his mind while he was on the air?
I don't know that I was thinking at all. As I was sitting at home, I just kind of began to think through some of the last 24 hours and begin to process some of those emotions and just kind of think about the implications of it. Because I think in that moment, I really didn't have an opportunity to do that. I think really it just came down to my training in meteorology and broadcasting to just do what I had to do in that moment. And I think in part you almost kind of go into a robot mode where you rely on your training, setting emotions aside, and then you kind of deal with those emotions later. Maybe it's as if a trauma surgeon or a doctor might do when you just need to focus on the science, focus on the mission that's in front of you, and then deal with the rest later. I think that's kind of how I dealt with it, and just focused on the data that was coming in between the warnings and the reports from the local emergency managers, and just focused on relaying that as best we could.
Seth Mode of Kokomo says he began making his way into the damage path. The sight was startling.
So as I pull up to the first houses, the people are just starting to come out, and they are obviously in shock. Some old man comes walking out to the driveway. He's, heartbreaking. He's bawling his eyes out. And, I holler up, "Are you okay?" And he waves, he's okay. And I kind of weave my way through the debris on the streets and trees everywhere. It was an absolute just nightmare. It was right then, and it just happened. It was just a weird feeling to be a part of that. I threw my drone actually up in the air, caught a little bit of damage as the first responders start arriving on the scene. That there's a Howard Haven home, I think it's called, on the west side of town, and it got hit pretty hard with trees and debris and stuff all over it. Then I just basically started working my way east to see where the tornado had gone through Boulder's West neighborhood and through the Haynes International area. It hit a little bit there. And this whole time I'm talking to Dustin. He's on the east side of town watching this thing come right towards him. He ends up seeing one of the tornadoes. I don't know which one he'd seen, but he could actually see it out of his car window as it was on the east side of Howard County. We didn't realize how much damage, destruction there was within the city of Kokomo at that point in time. We both just started working our way towards the middle to kind of try to capture what we could. So he throws his drone up in the air, and he would see a little bit of damage here. He would call me and say, "Hey, I'm over here, and looks like there's some damage in the Maple Crest area." And I was over here by the Kokomo Country Club, and I see some apartments that have been damaged. And we kind of worked our way, and we met kind of right in the middle of Howard County, right in the middle of the city of Kokomo. And we kind of went from there. As we were making our way through, more storms had happened around us. There was one up on the north end of Howard County, kind of in the Miami, Howard County area line. Dustin actually throws his drone up in the air, and he was able to capture it coming across the street. He was probably about, I'd say, 3 miles away from it when it happened, but you can actually see the storm cell going across the State Road 31 north. At that time, we kind of reconvened because all the power started going out all around the city, and our drones only have so much battery life. We depleted all of our batteries, and so we said, well, let's go back to my office because I'd driven by and noticed that we still had power. So we came back here to charge and kind of recoup and kind of share some of our footage with our followers on Facebook. In the process of doing that, we are at my office, and another storm cell actually comes right over the top of my office. And I'm thinking, well, we got to get to my house because there's no shelter here at my office. And at about that time, our phones start going off, and another tornado hit just south of us, about right on 26. There's farmland and Chippendale Golf Course. We kind of saw that from my office. So it was almost just like all these storms started happening all around us. We were in the middle of it. And as we are going to assess the damage from that one, we get another call on our phones that there's one going out in Rushville, which I know my niece is actually out at a house out there. Her boyfriend lives out there, and she was safe. They were in the basement. His house actually got a direct hit from the tornado, and she was, a survivor from it. It was pretty traumatic for her, talking to her afterwards. But at least she was safe, and nobody was seriously injured. So we just kind of proceeded throughout the night to go take more footage of the kind of the destruction and the pathway of the tornadoes. And we just kind of followed it from one end of the county all the way to the other and kind of just captured what had happened.
WWKI Radio's Tammy Lively said as a broadcaster, she knew she had to help her team at work. At the same time, she was awaiting word from her loved ones that they were okay.
So I advanced to the radio station as quickly as I could, tried to compose myself there, still hadn't reached my family. My brother, they also started talking about this tornado starting on Boulevard, which is where my brother was heading into it. I couldn't reach him, and then, you have to go on the air. So I have family that I don't know if they're safe and have to go into work mode. The great thing about this community is, and me being in this community for so long and having been on the air in this community for so long, you can pretty much ask something on the air and get an immediate answer via text from a friend. So I stated my concerns about my family and got a text immediately from my sister-in-law that my brother Tim was fine. Then I got a text from my sister Kelly that was more panicked because she had seen the tornado coming towards her and hunkered down in a parking lot at a bank, and but she was fine. So then we just went about the business of trying to bring the public this information, and we had tornado warnings from that point, and that was I finally went on the air at 4. We had tornado warnings from 3 p.m. when it all started until about 8:45, 9 p.m., something like that. It might have even been a little bit later. It was 6+ hours that we were under a tornado warning right here in Howard County alone. And as a broadcaster, I never have seen an event like that where it was just constantly, one after the other. Just now there's a tornado on the north side of town. Now there's a tornado on the south side. I mean, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Tammy's colleague, meteorologist Ryan Gregory, says it was truly amazing that there were no serious injuries or fatalities in Kokomo that day. He has a theory about why that was the case.
We don't have any sirens within the city of Kokomo except maybe one privately owned at a factory. So the county commissioners decided to spend $500,000 on this notification system. And people can go to the local Howard County government website and sign up and get all sorts of warnings and things. Not just weather warnings, but civil alerts, but particularly weather warnings. And I think it really helped save lives. The smartphone aspect, we were talking about that as well with the folks at the radio station. It's they're great when they work, but then we did see where the cell phone circuits were just jammed, where we could not get calls in and out of the cell towers for several hours after the event. So it was one of those times where we knew that the information that we were giving on the air was going to be so very vital, because half the county was out of power, and people crave information, obviously, in those times. So it was going to be very important.
The damage had been done in Kokomo. Meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Indianapolis, Dan McCarthy, headed for Kokomo to get a first-hand look at the strength of the tornadoes.
The worst was we did send out our warning coordination meteorologist, Dave Tusick, went up to Crawfordsville and tracked that tornado and found EF2 damage. I left around 3:30 that afternoon and headed to Kokomo, particularly because I wanted to see the area that was hit by the Starbucks on the east side there of Kokomo. However, once I found the beginning of that track, I had to keep an eye on radar because there was another supercell to our north, and there was another one to our west that we had to keep an eye out of and then get out of the way of. So on our way south, some more supercells developed, and we managed to video one tornado that came out of Rocheville, then dissipated, and then developed into a huge wall cloud just south of Kokomo and stayed out of the Kokomo area. Moving off to the east, it was more like southeast of Kokomo that we lost track of it. That gave us our first chance to really get up into Kokomo to see the damage. And then once we got to the Starbucks and saw the damage there and determined that that particular Starbucks had some like metal or roofing that was lifted up a bit, that allowed the walls to cave in, that was allowing us to determine that just that particular building was EF3 damage. Now, after serving on the original EF scale committee, we didn't like to determine the tornado's damage just by one building. But when I looked across the street, across Highway 31, that's when I noticed the neighborhood across the street from Starbucks was also hit. There was several homes there that already had red X's on them, which means they were severely damaged, but they were checked. One house did have one wall standing. The rest was down, and some of the debris was still around that area, but it trailed right back into that neighborhood.
The tornado outbreak was nowhere near finished. Jay Farlow is a ham operator and storm spotter from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Jay said over time he became acquainted with storm chasers who use an app on smartphones called Zello. You might say it's a modern-day version of ham radio. It was through this means of communication that Jay relayed tornado reports to the National Weather Service.
I have tornado on the ground. It just lifted. Ricker and Doty Road, Allen County. It's back on the ground, multi-vortex tornado.
Say again that location, I was busy on another channel.
Ricker and Doty Road, looking north. I have confirmed tornado on the ground.
Okay, Doty Road and what road?
Doty and Ricker.
Okay, got it, typing that.
Jay said as the tornado warnings were issued, he and his wife became concerned that they may be the storm's next target.
I began to realize about the time the Fort Wayne warning came out, this was not going to be a normal severe weather day. This was looking much more like an outbreak. because we simultaneously had tornadoes on the ground in several parts of the corner of the county warning area that I serve as a spotter. And then I'm looking at the radar and I'm seeing new tornado warnings to the west. You know what usually happens here in Indiana is a line of storms comes through and then you're done. Supercells to begin with are unusual here in Indiana. Usually we get linear storm formation. But usually once the storms come through, the atmosphere stabilizes, we turn off our radios, we go watch TV, we're done for the day. But I could tell new storms with tornado warnings kept popping up to the west. And at that point is when I went out. My wife was home from work by then. She was out watching TV in the living room. And I said, I think it's time to start making some preparations. And I encouraged her to go put on some sort of her hiking boots. I went out to the garage and I got my bike helmet and my ski helmet and brought them into our safe place, which is an internal walk-in closet here in our one-story house. And my wife Peggy and I talked about how we were going to herd our two cats, because at that point, I was to the point where I would not have been surprised if one of these new storms popping up to the west came through the city of Fort Wayne, as opposed to, hitting just a rural area. I was genuinely concerned that this was going to be a significant outbreak day, and that there was a reasonable possibility that we might actually be in the path of a tornado before the day was over. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but I definitely had some concern for that.
Michael Lewis is the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service in northern Indiana. He said because of the atmospheric setup that day, many were able to see tornadoes and call in reports to his office.
We had a relatively clear view below the cloud deck, so everybody was able to see these very clearly, and they were well defined. Normally around this part of the country, we get a lot of moisture and haze and rain wraps around, so it's very difficult to normally see those tornadoes. But this was a different environment. They were relatively low to the ground. The clouds were relatively low, so we were really able to get some good, clear shots and views. So we were getting a lot of reports, a lot of eyewitness reports, and a lot of video coming in via social media as well as some of the streaming sites that are out there. So we were really able to see these not only on radar but in real time from our spotters and chasers that were out there.
The coordination between volunteers like Jay Farlow and the many storm spotters out on August 24th played a huge role that no one was seriously hurt or killed. There was some damage, however.
Lots of houses and barns and trees. The part of Allen County that the tornado went through is relatively rural, and quite a few Amish families live in that area. And at least one Amish farm, according to television coverage I saw, had a barn destroyed. And part of that, by the way, is already back up because the way the Amish come together. The station I was watching had video of a horde of Amish folk at that site cleaning it up, and so they were pretty quick to respond. But that's basically what we got. It's just a few houses, a lot of agricultural. There was a chicken farm, I guess, lost a lot of chickens, but very agricultural, very rural. The beginning of the polygon for that storm was in a fairly urban part of the northeast corner of the city of Fort Wayne, which is the second largest city in the state of Indiana. But fortunately, the first touchdown that you heard Eric report, that happened well outside the city, and it was already in a quite rural area by the time we got to a tornado on the ground, and that's quite a blessing.
Michael Lewis from the National Weather Service in northern Indiana says that technology is speeding up the storm survey process, and it was used in assessing damage on August 24th.
Even flying in an airplane, it does not do justice to what a drone can show you. And we did storm surveys, 3 days it took us to do surveys of these storms. And these were not huge tornadoes, but there were a lot of areas that were impacted. It took us 3 days to complete all the surveys, and most of that was overtime that we had to do just by driving road to corner, trying to trace this stuff down. In one county, Van Wert County specifically, Rick McCoy is the EMA director there. He had done an aerial flyover in an airplane, but he has a drone, took his drone, was able to give us the damage paths. He was able to do the entire county of Van Wert in the time that it took our storm surveys team in Adams County to identify where the tornado was on the ground. So he had already had the path, the location of the most intense damage, the start and end points for I think there were 4 tornadoes in Van Wert County. He had it already mapped, and we were still trying to finish up one track in Adams County. So it saves immense amounts of time. And I think this is going to be the new wave for us going forward. Is it's not so much that it can tell us the intensity of the tornado. It will help us identify where the most intense part was, and that will allow us to then do more targeted forensics of that. That's going to be huge for us in the future.
Even though damage surveys were already being conducted across Indiana and parts of Ohio, the severe weather would not stop. Mark Robinson is a full-time storm chaser who works for Canada's The Weather Network. He had been watching what transpired that evening. His eye was on the storms in Ohio that would move across the Canadian border.
You know, this was a cell that came out of Toledo, but it was very funny because I happened to be down there for something completely unrelated to the actual storm. But I happened to have all my gear with me, all my storm chasing gear. And I've been watching this from my in-laws' place. And, you know, there was definitely some tornadoes on this. And I was sort of going, whoa, wait a second, what's going on here? Like multiple tornado reports, multiple tornado warnings. And I knew that air mass was coming up towards us. So I thought, yeah, you know what, I'll pull out the cameras and just maybe wander over to the Detroit River and see what's going on. And I did that. And at the same time, my father-in-law was going out sailing on the Detroit River. And I said to him, I said, well, you know what, I'm a little bit nervous about these storms. You know, this and some tornado reports that could come towards us. Looks like it'll arrive in our area maybe around 7 o'clock. And he said, oh, we'll be starting the race by then. We should be fine. And off we went. So I went off and shot some, rain and stuff like that, pouring stuff just for fun. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back to the house and grab the big camera, my normal sort of broadcast camera, and then run back out. Of course, I didn't take any of my batteries with me. I just took one battery that was sort of half dead. And I decided, I'll go out and check this out. I was watching this one sort of shower. It was sort of the tail end of the storm, and it would have been the thunderstorm that had produced the tornadoes near Toledo. And it was pretty much nothing left of it. And I said, well, you know what? There might be some high winds in it. Let me drive down just a little bit south to see the high winds. And on the radar, I noticed this red area in there. And that usually sort of indicates to me that there's a high wind. I thought, oh, this would be great. I'll get some high winds in the rain. That'd be fun. Oh, this would be great. Better than nothing. And I started driving south, and I was in sort of an urban area with some trees beside me, and I couldn't really see that well. So I couldn't really see the base of the storm. But I noticed as I'm driving, I sort of glanced down at the radar on my phone, and it suddenly was bright red. And I went, that's weird. And I came sort of out of the urban area and came towards the park, and I could see across the Detroit River at this point, and there was a rain-free base, a big one, over top of the river. And I sort of went, oh, that's not good. And I took a look at it again, glanced at the radar, and I noticed that it now put in a really big, beautiful couplet, like just this absolute amazing indication of a rotation within this storm. And I thought, okay, there's a wall cloud, a big giant wall cloud right there. I'm seeing rotation on the radar. This could get real bad real fast. But I thought, there's no way this is going to produce a tornado. And then all of a sudden, I saw this swirling cloud right underneath it, right where it should have been. And I thought to myself, I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing. Like, I literally at that point, I was like, have I been drinking? I don't think I've been drinking. And I, at that point, noticed the debris coming up from the trees. And at that point, I knew I had a tornado in front of me.
There are about 8 to 12 tornadoes each year in Ontario, and Mark Robinson's greatest worry is where they might track when they do touch down.
That was the kind of situation that scared I thought, hey, this is going to be horrific. The one thing that scares me for Ontario is because we've got such a high population density here that, you take the path of a Joplin or take the path of some of the big, the big tornadoes we've seen in the plains. We get them up here, but you put that path in southern Ontario, it's going to take out multiple towns.
In all, there were 2 tornadoes in Canada.
One in LaSalle and one in Windsor. That I saw the LaSalle one begin. And as I said, I was right there. So I sort of saw the whole thing begin. There was no change in the circulation. It was just the one mesocyclone went all the way across the whole area. And the 2 tornadoes were essentially born from that same mesocyclone. The second one was far stronger than the first, though.
Tornado outbreaks are unusual in August, and due to some factors coming together just right, it was a complicated afternoon to forecast. The National Weather Service typically puts out as much advance notice as possible when the potential is there, but in this case, the situation was different. Michael Lewis at the National Weather Service in northern Indiana says despite criticism on early forecasts, his philosophy is much greater than one event.
The beauty of this job is that we take the last part of our name very seriously, and that is the service. We are the National Weather Service, and that service does come before, in many times, in many instances, and this was a prime example, the service comes before self. And so there was a lot of selfless dedication to making sure that we served and fulfilled our service requirements. So, we continue to do what we do, and in spite of all the slings and arrows and the mudslinging that goes on and the critiques that go on there, we have pretty thick skins. We have pretty thick skins.
Dan McCarthy at the National Weather Service in Indianapolis spent much of his career at the Storm Prediction Center. Even though technology provides an insight into what severe weather might occur, it isn't an exact science.
Well, having spent 20 years with cells in the Storm Prediction Center before I came to Indianapolis, and I'm just about ready to start my 10th year here, it's really hard to determine. I mean, we have models that are mesoscale models that are really fantastic. They're really good. The high reflectivity, rapid refresh is really good model most of the time. But, having the data at 12Z0Z and then having the surface data, it could really help us out a lot if we could just have an additional sounding. Now, we went back and we looked at the data the next day before we headed back up to Kokomo, noticing that we had like a 30 to 35 knot jet from the west of 500 millibars and an 850 jet of 30 millibars from the southwest. We realized that the Lincoln sounding that morning of the Kokomo tornado had a 0 to 1 kilometer helicity of around 210, if I'm not mistaken. So, it seemed like we were barely there, that we had the atmosphere to do so, because we were kind of wondering, why are we getting, this is like the second time this month that we've had tornadoes. And August is not climatologically known for its tornadoes. Usually you're concentrating on tornadoes with tropical cyclones or something like that, but not tornadoes from supercells in the plains or even in the Ohio Valley. But after looking at data the next day or contacting SPC to help us look at data the next day, I was kind of surprised to see how many tornadoes that can occur in Indiana in the month of August. So that was somewhat a surprise. But yeah, if it wasn't for the idea of having the dual pole radar and being able to really examine those storms quickly, that really helped us get out the warnings earlier and more and often.
Jeff Frame, who holds a PhD in meteorology from Penn State University and is a contributor to UStornadoes.com, says this event will likely go down as one of the largest tornado outbreaks during the month of August since modern records began. He writes that tornado outbreaks do not occur if all the ingredients for them are not present.
While a number of ingredients came together in the wrong place at the wrong time, Frame says the exact location and strength of mesoscale convective vortices, just one of the features that enhance the event, are often difficult to accurately predict more than 12 hours in advance. He says he too wouldn't have forecasted a tornado outbreak on August 24, 2016.
In all, there were 21 tornadoes in Indiana and Ohio, with 2 in Canada. 10 twisters occurred in Indiana, 11 in Ohio. No serious injuries, no deaths. That may be the biggest severe weather surprise of that day.
The damage that occurred to the homes and businesses of many on August 24th upended lives. WWKI's Tammy Lively said it was the human spirit and community support that affirmed what's really important in life.
The thing about this community that I love so much and why I've been here all my life is that when something like this happens, we really rally together. And to see all the community efforts immediately, I mean, people started posting right after the first tornado, look, I have a bad back, but I have a chainsaw and a truck, and I can power through it. You know, tell me where to go. I can help. And all of those types of, you know, people couldn't do anything for so many hours because we still had active tornadoes happening and occurring, you know, for so long. But once people could begin to help, I mean, the American Red Cross went into the wonderful things they do as far as shelter. We had an event center here in Kokomo step up and say, look, we have power. You can come here. We will house you here. And that first night, I think they had 230 people who had to seek shelter there because they were displaced and didn't have family here and didn't have anywhere else to go. At the shelter, you see the Indianapolis Colts coming in with water and supplies, and they brought Blue, you know, the mascot, and cheerleaders and players to cheer the people who were there up. And they did it with no fanfare. There was no advance warning that they were coming. They just showed up. And you have people coming in from other counties with truckloads of bottled water and anything that, you know, they just want to know, what do you need? What do you need? I can help. And that community spirit and that level of caring for your neighbor is the thing that I'll take away from this.
Do you have a tornado story you'd like to share with us? We all know someone who's experienced one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Drop us an email and we will have you on our show. The address is jenanddan@tornadotalk.com. That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. Hurricane Hermine was the first landfalling hurricane in Florida since 2005, and NOAA predicted that 2016 would be one of the most active hurricane seasons in years. Next on Tornado Talk, how do tornadoes spin off of tropical cyclones? And what were the deadliest and costliest tornado-producing systems of all time? Tornadoes and the tropics on episode 20 of Tornado Talk.